Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos set out the next steps for reviewing Canada's cannabis legislation. It includes an independent panel that will help identify priority areas for improving how the legislation meets Canadians' needs and expectations. The review was supposed to start back in October of last year. That was 3 years after Canada legalized recreational cannabis, but the process was delayed. The cannabis industry stakeholders are hoping the review will result in meaningful changes. Just last hour, Duclos announced the scope of the review.
The panel will actually broaden that focus to include economic, social, and environmental impacts of the Act, the progress towards providing adults with access to strictly regulated, lower-risk legal cannabis products, see progress made in deterring criminal activity and displacing the illicit cannabis market, and the impact of legalization and regulation on access to cannabis for medical purposes.
CBC's Janice McGregor is tracking developments. She joins me live from our nation's capital. What else stood out for you in terms of what this review will tackle, Janice?
Well, as the minister was just saying there, I think the first thing to know is that it is broader in scope than the government was obligated to do under the original Cannabis Act. They had to, within 3 years, as you were saying, have a review, but that requirement was just kind of on the health and safety aspects to try to, address concerns some people had at the time of legalization about what the government was doing, which was ultimately enabling people to access something that could be harmful to their health. The review required then to look at issues like how it is affecting young people, the effect of legalization in Indigenous communities, supposed to also take a look at, how it's going, allowing people to cultivate marijuana in their home. But the minister today making it clear it's going to go much beyond that. And I think this is perceived as good news for an industry that feels overregulated, overtaxed, doesn't think the law as it stands has served them very well. It has been a kind of a crazy few years for the industry. A lot of people trying to make money, but failing. Stocks have lost a lot of businesses in the red, a lot of dissatisfaction in the provincial jurisdictions where they have kind of public competitors. And so I guess in this atmosphere of dissatisfaction comes a serious look at more than just the health aspects, although there are serious things to look at in the health review as well. Who will head it? Morris Rosenberg, a longtime federal civil servant, was deputy minister of 3 departments, including justice, including health, so presumably has a background on these issues. He talked a little bit more about the role he'll be seeking to play as chair of this expert panel.
Engaging broadly with Canadians and a range of stakeholders to gather their perspectives will be critical in helping to inform the work of the expert panel. And in this regard, I wanted to echo the words of Minister Bennett, that engaging with Indigenous peoples and communities will be critical to the success of this review. So I look forward to working with the panel and to provide an evidence-based advice to ministers to strengthen this particularly important piece of legislation and advance public policy in this area in Canada.
So the government is a whole year late kicking this off. Now, you could say, of course, they had the election, they had the pandemic, on and on, reasons for that. It won't be a short process. They've given themselves 18 months to come up with some recommendations, for additional sort of things Parliament might want to consider as far as legislative changes, although should be noted, nothing stops the government from making other changes, regulatory ones in the meantime, ones that people will certainly be suggesting to it as part of this process. And if you're at home wanting to kind of share your point of view, either as a consumer or a business person in this sector, for the next 60 days, there is an online survey that you can go on and put your input in. The minister's making a sincere call for people who are engaged in this issue to let the government know what you think has worked well or not so well so far.
And what changes, Janice, is the industry hoping to see?
Yeah, let's dive a little deeper into this, because it is very much a patchwork how this has unfolded in different provincial jurisdictions, and a lot of discussion about the ways that they believe, in some cases, government has held them back. Concerns about, not at first being able to sell higher margin products. That changed over time than they could after the initial rollout, and more recently, a request to be able to sell products with a higher THC content, edibles, for example, that are more potent. Well, that puts policymakers in an interesting situation. On the one hand, those products are available in the black market, and the whole point of this was to bring it into a more legally regulated, safe sector. But on the other hand, policymakers have to consider whether they want to enable people to take a stronger and stronger drug. We spoke last hour to Ben Kaplan. He's the editor-in-chief of Kind magazine. His focus very much, feeling like the government is very slow at taking action on this. Take a listen.
No secret, these guys are expanding. There's illegal operators with sidewalk sandwich boards advertising their wares, besides legal stores on both sides of them that are operating right now selling illegal stuff. Like, we don't need another year and a half to figure out that that's nuts.
So about 70% apparently of what Canadians are consuming right now is under this kind of legal regulated market. You heard Mr. Kaplan there suggesting, it is a problem to have unlicensed operators still able to sell in those kind of gray and black market ways. So just another thing that the government will be asked to look at in this review.
We'll talk again. That is CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.